Hello, my beautiful friends. I am Laurel Bleadon-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, welcoming you to this episode of Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast designed to help you rest, relax, and fall asleep, all while deepening in your connection with your beautiful team of angels who love you so. If we're meeting for the first time, I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls. And I offer one-on-one angel sessions, soul mentoring, and a variety of classes designed to inspire your spirit. And this might be your first time listening because I have started talking more about the podcast on my Facebook page at Illuminating Souls. And so perhaps you have sought out this broadcast and maybe this is the first time you're listening. So if it is, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. And to those of you who are regular listeners, I am so glad you are here as well. If you are new to the broadcast, you might be wondering what a sleep podcast is, so maybe I can share with you just a little bit about the intention for this podcast. So in 2015, I started listening to sleep podcasts, and the first one I really started having a relationship with is Sleep With Me by Drew Ackerman. It's a wonderful podcast, and he's been at it I think over 10 years at this point. And I found that I loved the intimacy of putting in my earbuds and letting a sweet, companionable voice tell me a story or keep me company as I was drifting off to sleep. And I found my way to other sleep podcasts as well. You know how we all have our own life rhythm? Well, in our household, I typically go to sleep before my husband does. Not by a long time, but I'm a early to bed person. I have apparently inherited my father's circadian rhythm. So I'm in bed by 8 o'clock. If I'm up at 9, it is a wild night here. I'm just off. I'm like, oh my God, it's so late at 9 p.m. So usually I'm in bed by 8. And I leave the television on for my husband because he likes to fall asleep with the TV. So the TV is usually on with the sound off. I've curled up into bed. I put in my earbuds and I pick out a sleep podcast and I listen to this one. So how awesome is it that I have created something that also works for me? So that's pretty cool. And I also listen to the Sleepy Bookshelf by Elizabeth Grace. I am listening to an episode from Sleep With Me where he is going shopping at IKEA. So I have to listen. It's that voyeur thing, like, yes, let's go to IKEA together. Even though I never go to IKEA. But I'm totally game for keeping somebody else company while they share with me about their IKEA journey. So in December of 2021, I launched this podcast because I wanted to add my voice to the sweet, soothing voices that were helping to lull people to sleep. And since it's me, I had to, of course, include the angels because my two favorite forms of self-care, or two of them, angels and sleep podcasts. Not realizing that my Illuminating Souls audience really didn't know about sleep podcasts. And so it has been an adventure helping to teach people how to use this podcast. Teach sounds really heavy-handed, doesn't it? Just introducing them to this concept. And plenty of you listen during your waking hours as well. So whenever and however you choose to use this broadcast, you have my blessing. But here's how it's going to work. Well, we're already into it. It's already happening. Usually the first 15 to 20 minutes, I share something spiritually related. I bring in the angels for you. I invite you into a cozy place to sleep. And then for the rest of the hour, because each episode runs about an hour, we go into story time. And story time might be stories from my own life. I might read to you from something that's in the public domain. We might flip through an old TV guide. In this episode, we are going to go through a community cookbook. This is another thing that I love to do with you. So more about that later. But for now, I invite you to get cozy in whatever way works best for you. Right now it's cooler in the Bay Area where we live, so we have lots of blankets on the bed, and I always sleep with lots of pillows. Even as I record this, it is early morning and the sun is not up yet. And I will share that I'm still in my pajamas. I'm usually 99% of the time, I wake up and I shower and I get dressed and get ready for the day. Because if I don't, I lollygag. I don't know that I've ever actually used that word out loud before. I just kind of ramble, and I find it much harder to get ready for the day. But this morning, I thought, no, I really do. I want to record this podcast before I'm completely alert and ready for the day. So I'm kind of in that transitional place between sleep and wakefulness. So the vibration is just perfect to bring to you this episode. And this moment is filled with so much love for you. Really, truly it is. And what a beautiful way to invite you into this space is to remind you of the love that is here for you. The angels are with you. They know you. They hear your prayers. They amplify them. And we are here to remind you of your innate preciousness. So why don't we take a nice deep breath in together and just release. Releasing whatever there is to be released. You know what it is. And if you don't, that's okay too. Release whatever your it is. Release it. Just let it go. The angels have created a beautiful vibrational sanctuary for you. I love that word, sanctuary. I love the places we get to go and the energy feels uplifting. It feels holy. I've experienced that hiking up trails. I've experienced that in man-made structures filled with God. And I've experienced that here with you now. Sanctuary can be cultivated just about anywhere. And so my prayer is this may serve as a place of sanctuary for you, where you feel the divine, and you know you are loved, and that this space has been crafted with light and love for you. So I'm going to invite the angels in to be with us. They're already here, but I love sharing the ritual with you. So beautiful angels on high, I invite you to join us here, and we receive your invitation to come into this sacred space. And angels, I ask that you bring prayers of light and healing, upliftment and blessings to each of our beloveds hearing this message. Angels, I ask that you help each one of us navigate whatever is present in our lives, helping us to gain altitude, connect with inspiration, feeling lightness of spirit and the beauty that surrounds us. So dear ones, just take some nice deep breaths in and out. And this is an invitation for you to share your prayers and intentions with the angels now. To just bring whatever it is into your heart and allow your angels to meet you where you are. And the angels are meeting you with love. So imagine, if you will, that this is a place that will help you clear your energy field through the heart of God, helping to clear away anything that isn't yours. A metaphor that just, it amuses me is to think of it as an energetic car wash. If you happen to have a car and you ever take it to the car wash, the satisfaction of having the dirty car go onto that belt that takes the car through all the different stages of the car wash. And it comes out the other side and it is clean. Great metaphor. Think of this as a beautiful, gentle, energetic car wash. You don't even need to know what is being cleared from you, but just as empathic beings here on planet Earth, we pick stuff up. It's like wearing black pants and sitting on the couch of somebody who has white dogs and cats. You're going to pick stuff up. It doesn't mean that you don't have good energetic hygiene. It's just life. So just allow the angels to gently clear your energy field, especially of that which is not yours. Allowing the light from source to flow in. I usually visualize it flowing in through my crown chakra at the top of my head. And to begin imagining that you are receiving this light. The imagination is a powerful gateway to connect with the angels. You might say, but if I'm imagining, is it true? Well, I believe that there is an overlap between the part of our consciousness that imagines and the part of our consciousness that receives divine guidance. It's not one and the same, but it overlaps. It's sort of like a Venn diagram. There's a subset of that consciousness. And so, if we use our imagination, which I know most of us have access to, I know some people have a harder time visualizing. But if you are one of the people who has your imagination as a portal through which you can co-create to imagine, this beautiful love is flowing to you now. Imagination is powerful. It can cultivate dramatic shifts in how we are experiencing the world. You know how I know? Because I'm a worrier. Are you a worrier? Do you worry? You know what worry is? Worry is our imagination. Our imagination is surveying all the different data points and is developing concern about outcomes. And then that is creating a neurochemical reaction in us. And it is creating more thought forms and more pathways in consciousness. It's I find worrying fascinating. I actually have what is called the worry gene, which is a conversation for another day. It's very common. 25% of the population has it. And what it means is that my understanding as a non-medical genetic professional is that there is an enzyme that burns off the dopamine in the prefrontal cortex. And in 25% of the population, it doesn't work as well. So we get dopamine overload. It's much more complicated than that. This is just my Earth Girl's synthesis of what I understand it to be. Feel free to correct me. But so, I'm a worrier. I've gotten much better about it over the years now that I understand it more. So I choose to use my imagination for divine connection. I'm not saying that I am imagining everything I talk about. I mean that I use my imagination as a boat ramp of sorts. It is a gateway through which I can connect. And then I feel the love pouring in. I imagine the love pouring in and I feel it, and it begins to soothe me. It uplifts me. I remember that I am in a universe that loves me. And if I am in a universe that loves me, I know you are in a universe that loves you too. Because I don't believe that I'm loved because I'm super special. Not that I'm not delightful. But we are all loved. We are all loved, and we are loved for who we are. We are loved in our authentic essence. So the authentic essence of you, the things about you that are lovely, the things about you that are messy and imperfect, everything that you are is loved. And the angels are here to amplify this frequency for you and with you right now. So just take a deep breath in and allow the angels to bring to you divine love calibrated just for you. And just open your heart and receive and know that they are here to take good care of you. They are here to shine light upon you. They are here to help you remember who you are as a divine being having your human experience. So take a deep breath in and allow this light to surround you and fill you, creating a cocoon of love just for you. And so, my beautiful friend, you go ahead and rest. The angels will be with you. And while you rest, we are going to go on into story time. So as I said before, for this story time, we are going to go through another community cookbook. So if you're new to the podcast or you don't know what a community cookbook is, these are compilations of recipes that groups of women would put together to create these cookbooks that then would be sold for fundraising. So whether it was a temple sisterhood, a church group, a PTA, some sort of association. And in many of the books that I collect are from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And what's so special about that time when it comes to these kinds of cookbooks? Well, there's no internet yet. And fast food does not have the hold on the population, at least here in the United States, that it does now. So this was an era when Mostly women did the cooking. I'm not saying men didn't cook, but we were still pretty well into our gender roles of the women would, for the most part, do the cooking. They had to prepare 3 meals a day for their families because, again, we're not going to the supermarket for prepared foods or going through the drive-thru on the way home. We're not meal prepping. We might not know of that meal prepping as a thing yet. We're also like the second generation in to having access to industrialized food production. So canned goods, frozen foods, which really revolutionized the nutritional profile of what we were able to consume. You know, these days we might look at canned green beans or peaches and not be very impressed with them because we want fresh. Well, back in the day, Wayback Machine, we didn't have access to year-round fresh produce in the way we do now. You know, now there's a whole global transportation mechanism for getting us grapes from Chile, or I get apples from New Zealand. Right, year-round, we have access to produce that my mom likely did not have access to in the 60s and 70s. We ate with the seasons. And canned food, frozen food, also allowed food to be picked, canned, frozen at the height of its season. And so it was made available in a way that was much less expensive, and it was dependable. You could go to the supermarket and grab a can of peas, and they would be there. So if you think about any of your relatives who are living in the late 1800s, this was a revolution. So this was also the era before the internet. So, you know, these days, if you're thinking, you know what, I would really love to make a red velvet cake, you go on your phone and you find 3,000 red velvet cake recipes, and you figure out which ones are best rated, and maybe one of them has a video of your favorite influencer making his or her favorite velvet cake, and then you make it. Or if you're like me, you go to the bakery. I don't eat sugar anymore. When I did eat sugar, I would just go over to Hummingbird Bake Shop, which is a bakery here in Vallejo, that allows you to buy one slice of cake. And they have typically at least 10 kinds of cake every day. Well, in the 50s and 60s, that was not as easy to do. Of course, there were neighborhood bakeries, but I mean the day-to-day preparation of food fell to the women. Most of them had some knowledge of how to make things. You'll find quite often in these community cookbooks that there's an assumption that the reader already knows how to cook and bake. So sometimes there's a recipe for a cherry pie, and it says, make a pie crust. Like, okay, if you're a housewife worth her salt, you already know how to make a pie crust. I'm not going to waste my breath telling you. You already get that part. That sounded kind of harsh. I'm sure that's not how they spoke. I just mean, there's this assumption that if you're a woman running your household and it's 1964, you already know how to make a pie crust. So the kinds of foods they're eating, depending on the decade of the community cookbook, so interesting to me. In the 60s, in the 50s, there's definitely a lot more gelatin-based recipes. Like put anything enrobed in gelatin and other stuff, and you had a fancy meal, or a side dish, or an appetizer, or a dessert. We're not as gelatin heavy these days. And the book that I'm going to read from the cookbook is really special to my heart. Some of you may remember the last community cookbook episode that I did. I shared with you that it was special because it came from Temple Beth Israel, which is my family's temple, the temple that we went to my whole life. And I found these on eBay, and I was so happy about it. So the one that we wandered through last month was from 1968, when I was 6 years old. And this one is going to be from 1982, where I would be 20 years old. So 14 years later. Now, I don't know if you're going to remember what main kitchen-based development happened in those 14 years. But since it's a sleep podcast, I'm not going to make you work that hard. It's the advent of the microwave. In 1982, many households have microwaves. I'm not going to go Google it, but microwaves are starting to become an integral part of the kitchen, but they're still relatively new. So we had been shifting from the era where everything had to be cooked on the stove or in the oven to now there is this thing called the microwave. And I remember when microwaves came out, how they're like, you can cook a chicken in 7 minutes. Nobody really wanted to do that, but they were these miraculous machines. And if you think about what was happening, at least here in the Western world, in our culture, was women were now in the workplace again. And so anything that could save time was a game changer. So there are a few little sections about microwaves and how to cook with them in this cookbook that I thought was interesting. I don't even know what I'm going to share with you from this book yet, but let's open the cover. It is called Food for All, the Sisterhood of Temple Beth Israel. And the inside cover is stamped the name of the woman who owned this particular cookbook. And she lived a block and a half away from our family home, which I don't know, that just delighted me when I received this book. So it's interesting because at this point, some of the women who are submitting to this cookbook and their committee are women who I grew up with. Like I was friends with their kids. So I won't read all their names to you, but I just have to go down this list in my heart. And I'm just so delighted to see their names and to honor them and the love that they brought into not only their families, but our synagogue. These are the women who took care of our Oneg Shabbat. The Oneg Shabbat is the gathering after services where they usually put out some pastries and some coffee and, you have a little nosh and you visit with people. But the sisterhood at Temple Beth Israel always created a deep sense of warmth and community for our congregation. And so that is absolutely a part of the tapestry of my life and my heart. And so I just really want to honor them. Also, just a heads up, I will pay special attention if I see any diet-related recipes because I have a soft spot in my heart for the way we were taught about food and diets way back in the day. I don't know if there are any in here. I just need you to know that I will be paying attention. And I love it when I have a cookbook that someone has written in, because this means they were trying the recipes. And we have one of those right away. Mini blintzes. Do you all know what a blintz is? It's like a crepe, but it's different. Typically, blintzes would have a sweet cream cheese kind of filling or blueberries or something like that. This one is interesting. This is a very 1970s, 80s recipe. 2 tablespoons of sugar, 1 loaf of white bread, sandwich bread, like Wonder Bread, sliced. Now, she has in handwriting Pepperidge Farm thin sliced. Now, as someone who went to Weight Watchers when I was 7 years old, I have a visceral memory of what she is talking about. They would have this bread. So if you can just imagine for a moment your typical Wonder Bread and how thick a slice would be. The Pepperidge Farm thin sliced would take that slice and slice it in half. And so it would get kind of dried out. I had many a sandwich on that bread. So this is why I remember it. 1 package of cream cheese, vanilla to taste, 1 egg yolk, melted butter, cinnamon sugar. And she says something about sour cream, but I can't read what the other word is. But some sour cream. So mix cream cheese, sugar, and egg yolk until smooth. Remove the crust from the bread and roll each slice flat. Spread each slice with the cream cheese mixture and roll up like a jelly roll. Cut each roll in half, dip in melted butter and then cinnamon sugar, and freeze. So this is great because this is a recipe you can freeze, aka meal prep. We've given it a very sexy name now. And then bake when you're ready. So when you're ready to use, you bake them at 350 for 10 to 15 minutes. And this is courtesy of Terry Katznelson Schechter. So for those of you who are with me for the 1968 episode, back then women were known as their husbands' names. So I would be listed as Mrs. Wesley Maffei versus Laurel Bleadon-Maffei. So it's now 1982. Some women's lib is happening, and the women are listed as their names. So we have our first appetizer. This is such a great reflection of how we were creating food back then. All right, you take some white bread, you cut off the crust, you roll it flat, you sweeten up some cream cheese. Right, you put some cinnamon sugar in it, and then you roll it up, and then you bake it, and it's going to be delicious. And you know what? It probably was delicious. What's not to love about that? Genius. Okay, and we have our first microwave dish. This is chips and cheese microwave appetizer. 16 large tortilla or Doritos chips. Now, I bet in 1982 we do not yet have the nacho Doritos as the main flavor. I think we're still doing taco Doritos, if I recall properly. And you might not be old enough to remember, Doritos were taco flavored for the first part of my life. And then nacho cheese came out and completely eclipsed the taco flavored ones. So we've got 16 large tortilla or Dorito chips, 4 ounces of Monterey Jack or Munster cheese, and 2 tablespoons of shredded cheese, optional. So place a sheet of wax paper on a 10-inch glass or paper plate. Cover with chips, sprinkle with cheese. Microwave at 50%, which is medium, for 1.5 to 2.5 minutes until cheese melts, rotating once or twice. And it makes 16 chips. The variation, place a small slice of jalapeno pepper or stuffed olive on each chip before sprinkling with cheese. And this is from Marilyn's Claire. Now, here's what I love in terms of exploring this time in our lives. You might think, how is that a recipe? You take some chips and you put some cheese on it and you throw it in the microwave. Like we've been doing that, for decades now. But the microwave was new then. And We weren't all eating Taco Bell and Mexican food. Like, well, that's kind of like nachos, right? I don't think I had my first nacho till it was well into my 20s. We weren't eating, at least in Skokie, we weren't eating a lot of Mexican food. So I love the simplicity of this, and I also love the perspective it gives to us about what was happening in 1982. Like, hey, there's this thing called the microwave. So take some chips and melt some cheese on it. It's delicious. So, I don't know. I find that fascinating. And I'm passing over all the things like the pickled herring and the chopped liver because I know that you really don't want to hear those recipes, but I just have to tell you they're here, of course. This is another, to me, a very 70s, 80s kind of recipe. Olive cheese appetizer. So you take 1 large package of sharp cheese grated, 2 small cans of chopped olives, 4 or 5 scallions sliced, 2 to 4 drops of Tabasco sauce, of which we would have never had in our house. We didn't do spicy. Margarine, because we were very much on a margarine over butter kick in the 80s. And 1 party rye, 1 side toasted. So here's my next question for you. How many of you know what they are talking about when they say party rye? So let me tell you. So first of all, you know what rye bread is, yes? Rye bread, a staple of Jewish households. There was this thing called party rye, and they were very, very small loaves of rye bread, sliced thin. It was much more the size of a large cracker, and they were used for appetizers. And they typically were kind of dried out. Like, you would not really want to make a mini sandwich on a piece of party rye, but they typically were vehicles for conveying something else delicious into your mouth. Right? Rather than a Ritz cracker, you might use a piece of party rye. So here what we're doing was we're mixing the ingredients together, using just enough margarine to hold the mixture together. See? So they're assuming that you're going to know. How much margarine should I use? Just enough. Okay, great. Just enough. And then spoon on untoasted side of bread and broil until slightly brown and bubbly. By Ruth Dauber. This is very much the kind of recipe that women would trade with each other. Because first off, who has the time? These women are busy. They're doing everything in their households. They're having to make all the meals. They're probably working outside of the house at this point. So they're going to get a package of party rye. They're going to get some cheese, some olives, just enough margarine to hold it all together. And then you broil it. Delicious. I'm sure it was delicious. I can taste it right now from my food bank memories. Fabulous. Okay, so we had our first microwave recipe. Listen, we're only in the appetizer section. We have so much more of this community cookbook to go. This is easily going to be multiple episodes, at least 2. Low-cal spinach dip. We have our first low-cal. Perhaps in 1982 we were saying low-cal rather than dietetic. Dietetic was really big in the 60s. Perhaps low-cal is the way to go now. So this is low-cal spinach dip. 2 boxes of frozen chopped spinach. So, back in the day, getting fresh spinach was not as easy as it is now. So spinach came in these frozen boxes. Not even a bag. They were boxed, so they were chopped and compressed. And so typically if you were going to be making a dish with spinach, you would defrost the boxes of spinach. They were small, maybe, I don't know, take a piece of paper and fold it in half. A little bit smaller than that, as I recall. And then you would have to drain it because, it would be frozen, and so you would drain it. So I don't know if we're going to drain it here. Oh, we are. So, see, look. I could be a 1980s housewife. 2 boxes of frozen chopped spinach, 6 to 7 green onions, 1 teaspoon of dried parsley, because we didn't have fresh very often, salt and pepper, garlic powder, and Weight Watchers mayonnaise, because we could not be trusted with real fat mayonnaise. So, you defrost the spinach and squeeze out any water. See? The things I know are terrifying. Chop green onions, tops and all. Mix spinach, onions, and parsley. Start with 2 cups of mayonnaise and add more to make it dippable. Season with salt, pepper, and garlic powder to taste. Serve with fresh vegetables and wheat wafers. Make the night before serving. This is a very 80s kind of recipe. And this is, again, from Terry Katznelson-Schechter. I have to give a special shout out to French onion soup. So I did a whole episode about my memories of Evanston, Illinois. And in the Evanston episode, I share with you about how my girlfriends in high school and college, we were perpetually dieting, which I just think most girls do at that age, right? And we thought if we were eating soup and salad, we were being healthy. And our favorite restaurant was called Fritz That's It. That was in Evanston. That was known for its incredible salad bar. The salad bar had things like chocolate chip cream cheese. Blue cheese dressing with big chunks of blue cheese in it. The term salad was just a suggestion. Clearly, it was a feast. And then they had French onion soup. Maybe you don't know about French onion soup. It's this very thick, buttery, oniony broth soup. And then they float a crouton in the big tureen bowl. And then they melt the most amazing blend of melty cheese on it. And so my girlfriends and I used to go to Fritz That's It when we were on a, quote, diet, and absolutely binge at the salad bar and get French onion soup. But we would have them hold the crouton. That was our version of being in a diet. Hold the crouton. Even though I'm going to be having 2,000 freaking calories of your chocolate chip cream cheese and all the melty cheese. I can't handle the bread on the crouton. That might put me over the limit. So I have to share with you the French onion soup recipe as my shout out to all of those memories of my French onion soup sans crouton from Fritz That's It. So we're going to take 4 Spanish onions, 2 sticks of margarine. The early 80s, we were big into margarine versus butter. 4 to 6 cans of beef bouillon soup. Feel free to use a vegetarian broth if that's your jam. Swiss cheese. I seem to recall the restaurants would use Gruyere, but we're in Skokie. Swiss cheese, French bread, and wine. Again, we're not going to tell you how much wine or what kind of wine. We just figure you know. So we're going to dice the onions and saute in margarine. Add 4 quarts of water and onions to an 8-quart pot. Simmer for 45 minutes. Add soup and wine. Cook for half an hour. And then to serve, you put a slice of Swiss cheese in each bowl and melt in the oven for 10 minutes. Now, they forgot to tell you you put the bread underneath the cheese so the cheese doesn't just dive into the bowl. But that's okay. Oh, here, wait, I skipped. You know what? On the next page, it says, put piece of toasted French bread on cheese. So they're having you put the bread on the cheese. Well, if Fritz had said they put the bread under the cheese so the cheese would be on top of the tureen. And then you bake in a 350-degree oven for 20 minutes. Oh, here's Mom's split pea soup. I love a good split pea soup. So 1 cup of peas, yellow or green, 1 small onion chopped, 1 or 2 carrots chopped, 1 celery stalk with leaves chopped, 1 teaspoon of salt, a dash of accent, which was a flavoring salt, 6 cups of water, and a 1/3 cup of pearl barley, optional. Boil water, add other ingredients, simmer, and cover until soft. Again, they're assuming you know how to cook already. I think here when they're talking about a cup of peas, yellow or green, they are not talking about canned peas or frozen peas. They are talking about the dehydrated peas. Now, I know they sell dehydrated peas and things like that in the soup section. If you're having a Jewish household, you know about the split peas in the little cellophane tube. If you look at any Jewish food section, you will see them. Typically, they come in a little cellophane tube, it's like a baggie, right? Like a little baggie tube, and usually there's some sort of seasoning in with it. It's the easiest thing ever for split pea soup. You open the little bag, you put it in boiling water, and a little while later you have delicious soup. So that was only appetizers, you guys, and we're almost towards the end of this episode. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip to desserts because I have to give you a dessert, at least 1 or 2 of them, in a community cookbook episode. But we're going to come back and do more of this particular cookbook in another episode. But I'm going to bring us to ice cream kolaches, or kolachkis, as I seem to recall we might have called them. So a kolachki or kolache is like a little piece of pastry that gets stuffed with something. So these are ice cream kolachkis, or it says kolaches. That's what's messing me up. Kolachis. Jewish friends, kolachkis or kolaches? Kolachkis, right? That's what sounds right. Okay, so you take 1 pound of oleo, softened. How many of you remember what oleo is? It is margarine. The margarine industry convinced us for many years that butter was bad for us and we should have margarine instead. So 1 pound of oleo, aka margarine. 1 pint of vanilla ice cream, softened. That's not much. And then you have 4 cups of flour and 2 tablespoons of sugar. So I'm sharing this particular recipe with you because the woman who owned this cookbook wrote, very good. Also with cinnamon and sugar and butter toasted slivered almonds. So I love when I find a cookbook that somebody has left notes in because it tells me they've made this. So we're going to sift the flour and sugar together. Cut oleo into flour to resemble fine meal. Add ice cream and mix into workable dough. Wrap in foil and refrigerate overnight. Pinch off 1 tablespoon of dough at a time and divide into 2 balls. Flatten with thumb, put on ungreased cookie sheet, fill with jelly or solo filling, bake at 350 degrees for 20 to 25 minutes, cool, and sprinkle with powdered sugar. And I just have to say, I now know what they're talking about with solo filling because my cousin introduced me to a Betty Crocker recipe for apricot bars a few months ago. And that you use the apricot solo filling in that I am now completely obsessed with, but I cannot make them because I really do not eat sugar. Although I started eating these, which is a slippery slope to sugar for me. So I can only make them when I have company or I have something where I can only have 1 or 2. But you know what? Let me share that recipe with you because it is one that I have made several times and it is very delicious. Okay, so this is it must be a Betty Crocker recipe. It's listed as date bars, but my cousin makes them as apricot bars, so that's what we're going to go with here. And she said that she started making them because my cousin's mom, my Aunt Jane, who I shared with you about in the last episode, used to make these. I don't remember them from Aunt Jane, but I love my Aunt Jane and I love my cousin, so I'm happy to share this very easy, delicious recipe with you. I'm going to slightly adapt this recipe a little bit to how I do it. All right, so you're going to do 3/4 of a cup of butter. Listen, I have lived my way to 61 years old, and I now do butter and not margarine. So if I'm going to cook something, bake something, we're talking butter. 1 cup of brown sugar packed. Now I cut back a little bit on this, but you do you. 1 3/4 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and it calls for 1.5 cups of quick cooking oats. I use 2 cups, and I use the Trader Joe's bag of oats. I don't know if those are different than the oats they're calling for, but that's what I do. So, you're going to heat the oven to 400 degrees and grease a baking pan that's 13 by 9. So you cream the butter and the sugar together. So you want to have the butter soft so it can cream together. And then you're going to mix in the remaining ingredients. So the flour, the oats, the baking soda, and the salt. You want to let it be kind of rough, like you don't want it to be totally smooth because you want it to ultimately be a little crumbly. So you press half the mixture evenly in the bottom of the pan. Now, it's going to be kind of hard to do, but you'll do it, or else you can let the mixture harden a little bit in the refrigerator so it's not so soft. So you use half the mixture for the bottom part of the pan. Then you take 1 can of the Solo apricot pastry spread, and you do your best. It's going to be kind of hard to do because everything's kind of crumbly, but you spread that on the first layer. And then you take the rest of your mixture and you put that on top. And then you bake it for 25 to 30 minutes or until lightly brown. It is so delicious. It's so easy to make. And I really don't eat sugar anymore, but I did eat these. So I guess that's sugar, right? But it doesn't necessarily, it hasn't triggered my sugar addiction. But I have realized that I cannot keep these in the house because I was making them, for Thanksgiving. And I made a double batch in case the kids really liked it. And I had some in the freezer. And there's this whole illusion that if I have pastries in the freezer, I will not eat them, which I'm 61 years old. I know this is BS. I'll eat a frozen cookie. Come on. I have no shame. Or I can just leave it on the counter for 30 minutes and it'll be thawed. Or, hi, I lived my way into 2024. I have a microwave. So, lots of options for defrosting pastries. So I cannot have these in the house anymore. But if you invite me over and I need to bring a dessert, I will make these. And then I can have 1 or 2, which will delight me to no end. So, there you go. Those will be our 2 desserts to sing us home in this episode. We have the ice cream kolachkis, which I've never made. And I've now given you my cousin's recipe for apricot bars that she got from my Aunt Jane. So we'll call this a treasured family recipe. So thank you for being here with me. I love you. I love getting to share all of this with you. These are some of my warm, treasured memories, and there's something so beautiful about sharing them in the breath, sharing them in the collective consciousness so that they exist. I really encourage all of you to get into storytelling in whatever way you can share your stories, because our lives are rich tapestries of experiences, and we don't only have to share our most important stories. We can share about our apricot bars and the time we figured out that if we put chips with some cheese in this newfangled microwave, we could have a really yummy snack. So I hope that I have been able to keep you company and share some love with you, because I love you very much. So I wish you the sweetest of dreams. I look forward to being with you again soon. So thank you, and I love you.